So I'm going to walk you through my Procreate watercolor workflow. I have a workflow in Workflow app that copies my base file and puts a timestamp on the clipboard so I can name the file in Procreate with the time. I'll post that on the forum as well. Basically, that's saved as a bookmark, and I open that rather than Procreate when I want to start new painting. So tap on that, copies the timestamp, copy to Procreate. Let's go back to the gallery and rename. So a bit about my brushes. The ones I'm using right now, the main one is the Heavy Start Wisp. Anything with heavy start basically starts out with a darker stroke, and if you put more pressure on the pencil, it becomes lighter. Anything with light start is the opposite. So if we pick a color and just start with resting the pencil on the screen, and as you press, it becomes more transparent, and as you let go, it goes dark again. Versus the light start. So that's just resting the pencil on the screen, press, and it becomes dark. Also have a few non-glazed brushes. The Heavy Start Flag, this sort of bleeds out into paper surrounding. And the last thing that I mainly use is the mixers, which are non-glazed as well, and they start out with a little bit of pigment and quickly change to very transparent. And if you sort of get it in the right place and do it quite fast, you get water, and it's pretty much like the smudger, but I find it easier to use the color mixers in most instances. It's usually for small areas, like if I want to just blend that, just do a couple taps and get some nice watery effects. So my layer setup, we're on the paint base, so that's just set to normal mode, and because the brushes are semi-transparent, the layer ends up semi-transparent. That's where you do all your artwork. On the texture and wash, got the top layers set to multiply mode, so they are both separate textures. The fibers is sort of like paper fibers, or like in money, where you get the sort of long fibers that you can see in this. Probably get a better brush to point stuff out, but you can see there's paper fiber along there, etc. And then I've got my main watercolor paper texture, which I've created from scratch. The fibers one is just a scan of real paper. There's variations of both of those that do different things. So the ones set to color burn down below are exact copies, just with the blending mode changed, and what they do is only affect areas where there's paint laid down on the base layer. So you'll sort of get if I hide these, you'll see what happens when I hide them as well. So multiply doesn't really have much of an effect on those, whereas the color burn does. The specular lights and specular darks are basically in the area where there's paint. So color dodge will also only affect where there's pigment laid down, and the darks affect the specular darks layer is set to lighten mode, which mainly affects the dark areas. So you can see where there's when I toggle it, you can see that area there where there's a lot of pigment laid down, and it's fairly opaque. It brings the texture back into it as if it's a specular light, like highlight from a light source. The lights is the same thing, but is more global. But both of them only affect where there's pigment. Obviously, you can adjust the opacity to your liking. The actual textures in those layers is a composite of these the two set to multiply, and then I've gone in and adjusted how that with the curve. Sorry, how that is that. So the color burn will only darks affect what's below. So anything light will have zero effect. Anything white, whereas anything fully black will have a lot of effect. So I've adjusted the curves on a composite of the fibers and watercolor paper to just affect the dark areas basically, and the lights is just a variation. Oops, is just a variation on that. So that's that. I'm going to start that over again. And finally, the line work. Sorry, the reason I started that over was just so I can get my layers back highlighting, because I can't remember what the opacities are by default. Line work layer is for your sort of pencil sketch. I've put that above because I don't really want it affected by all the textures, at least not initially. Sometimes I'll put it just above the paint base layer when I'm done. And the wash lights, wash darks is just a bunch of texture basically, mainly with Abby's watercolor brushes. So again, I've set them to color dodge and color burn. Color burn darkens the darks, and color dodge will lighten the lights. It's something I'm relying less and less on. Sometimes I'll hide those layers altogether, depending on the artwork on the base layer. It kind of breaks some of your strokes up with a bit of texture, and because of the blending modes, only affects where you've painted on the layer below. Your mileage may vary basically, but you can kind of stick any sort of texture in there as long as it's sort of random and watercolory. I posted like a sample, and there's other samples on the forum. It's kind of not really as important as the layers above as far as the overall workflow goes. Let's see. So I'm gonna stop this video just now, and the reason being because I've in my post sort of documented up to this point, and I'm gonna make a separate video on displacement, just so if that's all you're interested in, you can sort of jump in there, and then you don't have to go through basically the same stuff that's in the post. So see you in a minute.